A few moments later.
Well, you can't become a sous chef, definitely never a head chef. You can't, you know, make those moves unless you at least know how to take it. It can be a sharp knife, but you risk more of it kind of cutting into the salmon. But as you can see, I'm not really babying it by any means. I'm just kind of rubbing it back and forth, and you can see those scales just coming off really, really nicely. Like that. And when you do this, if you're trying to scale the whole fish, you always want to make sure you get up onto the head and into the up here into the joints, because when you actually go to take it off the bone, it also helps come off the bone. There we go. See how easy that was? And you can see the kind of difference between, obviously it's got really nice shine, but that skin is really, really beautiful, quite resilient. And when we actually cut it, we'll probably score it. So that way, when you do score it, you're gonna kind of relieve some of the pressure and you won't get the big bubbles. Does anyone here scale fish or clean much fish?
Yeah, in the Philippines.
Nice. I've worked with a lot of Filipino chefs over the years, and I honestly love working with them. And I've grown to learn to eat fish head stews and stuff like that. And I love it. Yeah, but I've learned a lot of fish stuff from lots of people from the Philippines. So again, the bag is really just for a much easier cleanup, because as you kind of work with. Everyone's going to have a kind of a trick or how they like to do it. I always often use a towel if you want to put it down there so it's not going to move around, because obviously a fresh fish will often have some sort of a slime or often be a little bit slippery. So you're better off just using your towel. Your towel's going to get really dirty. That's what they're for. So have it there. That way it can't slide around. I usually go... You can come this way, but I'm not going to really be using the collar. I'm going to take it there. I'm going to cut it. I want to get all the meat, so I'm going to go right up to the back of its head, back here. And then the natural line is going to go right down where obviously this top fin is. Here's when you're cutting things, you want to be slicing and using the entire length of your knife. That's why you sharpen the entire length of your knife. You want to use the whole sense of your knife. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to get all the way. And I'm gonna meet that cut that I made down there. So now we've essentially kind of dislodged it from all angles except for the actual thing. And inside it's still connected obviously by its bones and all that stuff. So the easy thing is just to go in there and take it off. I personally over the years have found that it's much easier to do the same thing on the other side first. And the reasoning behind that, once you take that fillet off, then it's going to be sitting flat, the bone on the board, but the head's still attached, so you're not going to have a real easy surface to work with. So I often will do it the other way. So basically the same thing. Going to go into the head there. If you need to, go around so you make sure you're not going into it. Like that. All the way. Way up and down. Okay, so essentially, okay, so as you can kind of see, so then I flip over, and then you can still see kind of all that. Some people like to try to go underneath and get this. I like to just leave it there. I find you have a lot more control having the fillet by itself and then taking your knife and getting underneath that way. But as you can see, I did a pretty good job. I wouldn't say I did the best job ever, but I did a pretty good job in the sense there's not a lot of meat left on there. One thing you can do right away is go like that. And you're gonna use all that meat. We can use that for tartare. We can use that for lots of different stuff. We can use that for mousses, because obviously we don't want to waste any of it. But overall, pretty clean for the most part. It's pretty hard to get much deeper without kind of breaking up its spine and all that. So, yeah.
Are you supposed to leave the scale on the side of the fish? Because I didn't see you remove the scale.
I removed the scale just on part of it here, and that I only did part of it only because that's just I'm gonna be showing you only part of it scaled. So if I was gonna be using the whole fish skin on, I would have scaled it. Same thing, I'm gonna hold the tail here, and I'm just gonna slide. I've got my knife slightly angled down, not to the point where it's gonna cut into the bones, but angled enough where it's not gonna ride up and grab into the flesh. So you can hear those bones. Go to the top. Okay, same thing. I'm just gonna grab any more of that extra salmon that's there. Salmon bones, confident strokes, because the more you stop and saw, the more damage you're generally gonna be. But like anything, it's gonna take years, and it's gonna take you doing this a ton of times before you're gonna get really good. But use your knife. So I'm gonna kind of go like that. I'm gonna get it underneath. I'm not really looking to dig it in. I'm just looking to get the top part. Sometimes these bones will give you a little bit of trouble because you need to get underneath them. But I'll go like that. I'm gonna use the whole bit of my knife without taking a lot of the flesh. So you can actually see my blade under there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Sharp knives. Yeah. I tell you all the time.
It's so important. It's a totally different job if you don't have that sharp knife. And that's why, again, just take the 2 seconds it takes to clean that steel or put it on that steel.
But
so then
keeping your knives at that sharpness, keeping them there, because if you put your knife away sharp, it's going to come out sharp, right?
absolutely.
Whenever you need it.
So we're not really wasting anything there because we've got our ribs right here, and then that's just the top bit of the belly. You can leave more of this, like if you were to do it the other way, take the ribs off in there, then you have some of that nice fat there, but this is kind of perfect, and you can see the fattier the belly is there. Okay, so we skinned, as you can kind of see, we skinned up this. This is going to be basically where our belly is. I'm probably going to strip that right off, and we're going to use that for something else. And then we're going to have a couple portions here with the skin on, and then we'll have that as the kind of skin off. So normally, if I was going to skin it, I would just skin it now. But because we're going to try to use some of this with skin off, I'm going to go like this. I'm going to take that belly and have that. We're going to put that there. And then fish pliers. Really important to have either this style, or you can actually get the kind of the side ones. But they are very important to have because obviously boning it is very important. I missed a couple at the top here, so you can pull those out. And then again, I'll find my bones, and because there's always going to be a couple small ones, see how they go like this, and then they kind of curve there. So you want to make sure that you do your best to grab them. What I try to do, and when it's fresh, they're going to be a little bit more difficult to get out, which is a good thing. But so I usually will hold like this, the fish, and then grab the bones and just kind of let them naturally kind of go. You kind of tug, put pressure on it, and then I hold them there, go to my next one. Sometimes you can get two at a time, like that. So I'm just kind of, see, I'm not really pulling, I'm just using the weight of my arm almost. And I'm pulling them out the way that they naturally should come out. I'm not yanking them this way or yanking them this way because the grains are going that way. So don't try not to disrupt the grains.
They'll destroy the fish if you go and start pulling it out.
Exactly. See how they're naturally, now that I've got a feel for it, they're naturally just almost kind of coming out by themselves. And how I hold it with this hand, and then putting the bone in there, so that way you're not wasting a bunch of time going back and forth all the time. Okay. Any questions, anyone? I've never even counted, but I would probably say at least 30. Yeah. Yeah. Till they're gone, I guess would be the answer. And then there's always going to be a couple small ones in here too, and you know, a good chef was after they portion all the fish and everything. You're gonna go through it all again. You know, put your fingers on it like that, kind of run your fingers down, and as you can kind of see, if you kind of wipe like that, you shouldn't see big holes and stuff like that. You know, and that's the thing when people start just gouging in there with their tongue, with your pliers. Your pliers shouldn't be ever grabbing into the meat like that. I would get kind of clean down here stuff, but I'm going to show you how to skin it. So for whatever I want to do, so that's not going to be wasted. This is a pretty thick piece of salmon, so if I was to cut it there, we're probably looking at about a 7-ounce portion, which is probably quite a large size portion for any type of main course. So I'm going to go like that. So as you can kind of see how beautiful that skin is. And then you can see I've got a couple little scales left there. It's not a big issue. We're gonna run our knives in there along there and make sure we didn't leave any scales. And I'll always wash this, wash it after. So after I clean everything, I'm gonna go over to the sink, rinse everything in nice cold water, dab it with towels, and then put that on a tray, and then it's beautiful for service. So
make sure it's cold water. Warm water is red.
Absolutely, yeah. And you want to work fast too. If you're going to be cleaning 6 fish, you don't want to bring 6 fish out, sit them on your bench, and work through them. You want to pull out 1 fish, 2 fish, depending on how fast you are. You want to bring them out gradually. You get them off the bone, get them in the fridge, work on 2 that you need to portion, that kind of thing. So don't just pull everything out and let it sit on the counter. This is a really beautiful tube salmon, and as you can kind of see too, that's beautiful, right? Out of any kind of product you want to use, you're going to see all those grains, especially if you roast that in kind of oil and butter. All those beautiful grains are going to come out, and it's just going to be a really beautiful portion. And the skin, obviously, you're going to see the different colors of it and stuff. So I'm going to give my knife a little kind of quick sharpen, and because this piece of fish is so thick, we're generally, when you cook fish on the skin, you're going to cook it pretty much 80% on the skin and just flip it and seal it on the other side. But because this is such a thick piece of fish, you might have to cook it too long on that side. So, and then also to get the skin nice and crispy, you need to be able to you're essentially taking all the moisture out of the skin with oil and butter and getting it browned up. So I'm going to give it a little score. And when you're scoring, you don't want to, I'm not looking to cut it all the way down here. I'm just looking to essentially pierce the skin. Oh, see, even I went a little too far there because my knife's too sharp. See?
You don't have to do it. The knife should do all the work.
Exactly. You don't want to have to force it. And so, if we want to do a smaller portion too, I can look at that and go, okay, I'm going to cut that in half, so we can have more like of a tasting size portion. And if you want to be kind of more fancy, and I'll show you a little later, if you don't want it to be cooked under and you have a good use for the other thing, I'm going to put my hand on the fish. I'm not pushing on it, I'm just putting a little bit of weight on it. And then I'm going to go down and I'm going to turn in. And then now you've got kind of like a more kind of, nice kind of piece of fish. Whereas this isn't waste. This can be used in other ways. We can use this for mousse or tartare or whatever you want to use it for. But now I've got a little bit better shape of a piece. Same thing, I'm not gonna go too deep into it. Just scoring it down like that. As you can see, I'm just kind of breaking it, and all those little grains, it's gonna help it kind of cook through evenly, but it's also gonna just help you get it nice and crispy in there. Okay.
When you're scoring the skin on it, you said you put your hand on it, but it almost looks like you're slightly pinching the skin when you go across it.
Yeah, you want to you're almost like plumping it up. So it's rather than me trying to get all the way down into it, you might as well. And again, because it's uneven right now, I can relieve some of that pressure by taking it down there. So now I've got a flatter thing. But you're right, by pinching it a little bit, now the middle is out. So then I don't have to really go for it. I'm just kind of. Yeah. So I can go like this and I can hope to get it, but it's gonna drag it. Whereas if I put my finger like this, then I know I'm only gonna connect on those pieces. That's a good question. Okay, so now we've got this side, which we didn't skin the, if you do it like that, you can, if you're really, really new to it and you really feel like you need to grab a hold of something, you can stick a knife through and you can almost put your finger on it, like if you've got a big side, if you need to grab somewhere. But I don't usually do that. No, I did, then I screwed that. Okay, so you want to get underneath. This is up to you kind of personally. In say a really fine dining setting, often when you don't want to see any of that underneath fat that's between the skin and the fish. Not because it actually tastes quite good, but in the fine dining world. But the skin's quite resilient, so this is where you want to just go, you kind of just almost pull the back of it and hold your knife almost somewhat flat. So I've left a lot of kind of there. So I'm going to say, so I'll show you what we have to do at when I worked for Gordon Ramsay at his 3-star. So you've got a line kind of coming down here. So say he didn't ever want to see any of this kind of fat, and we weren't even allowed to kind of have this little bit in the middle. And so you'd go like this and have your piece here. And so what I would do is I'd come, take like this, and flap it over. And see, now you're gonna see that natural kind of line in there. So this is where I would go and now come all the way down. And you can still see that line there, which was generally unacceptable. Like you'd have to kind of get it right in there, and so you'd have this beautiful piece. Again, this isn't something I necessarily believe in, but this is just something that we would have to do, and I'm going to show you.
But again, in that world, I mean, that's what it is. So how many fish would you think like that daily, right?
Oh, tons, just to get those perfect portions, right? And it was all about those.
It takes repetition, it takes time, all of these things, all of these skills.
And then so, and don't get me wrong, it's absolutely gorgeous when you get a perfect piece. And so I'm going to take this belly and same kind of thing. Same thing, I put my hand on here because you can kind of see how the fish is going like this naturally. It's a bit thicker here, it's a little bit thinner here. So if I just go like this, it's not going to work as much. So I put my hand on here. I'm not putting a ton of weight, but I'm putting a bit more on the front. So then I'm going to use the whole blade. I'm going to go like that. I'm going to slide it kind of inwards like that. And see if you can kind of see how, like that's quite nice. It makes you feel good. It looks good. Everything about it. And same kind of thing. So I'm gonna trim up that. And see that little thing on the end there, it kind of annoys me. So I'm gonna push it up, and I'm gonna use its own weight to snip it. Same thing. Kind of put my hand down on it a little bit, get a little nice kind of clean cut. And all these things, again, just kind of come to you eventually after you've cleaned fish enough times. So now you have all those nice grains all the way around, right? The whole thing is going to be really showing off those grains. So a piece like this, I would start in a little bit of oil, probably in a pan, finish with a little bit of butter, baste it, so that all these beautiful grains, which I'll do later, we'll keep this piece, and we'll roast it in a pan like that. And you're going to see all those nice golden, get all nice and golden, and then inside, generally salmon, I mean, you want it to be medium at kind of most. So we have just straight salt, and then we have some white sugar. So it's probably about, I would say, 80% sugar, 80% salt, 20% sugar, like that. Yep.
Why do you put sugar with the salt?
You kind of want to balance out the salt. The cool thing about, like, normally if you put that much salt on anything, it's going to be gross. It's going to be super, super salty. Whereas when you do it with obviously curing meats, but even salmon, like we're gonna cure this for probably 2 hours of it being packed. I will put on an 1.5-hour timer. I'll take it off, rinse it off. I'll slice a piece, taste it, check it, and then if I'm happy with it, I'll keep it out. And if I'm not, I'll just put it back in. So you have the kind of the variable there. Do we know where that's?
What are you doing?
Put some fennel seeds in there. You can put cumin, you can put chili flakes, you can really kind of put anything you want in there. But right now we've got salt. Once I get the microplane, I'm gonna put some lemon and some lime, and that's pretty much it. I'm gonna take.
Just the lemon, yes.
Yeah, I'm just gonna use the zest. So, we're gonna cure, I think, a piece about this thick. That should give us enough for everyone to taste a piece. Okay, so you can decide if you want to keep some of that bottom fat belly. I'm gonna slice some of it off. As you can kind of see, I'm gonna kind of shrink up like this. That way I can get a nice kind of clean stroke. I can even go like that and pull my knife out. As you can see, no matter what though, I'm doing strokes. I'm not sawing. Disaster if you're looking to dice it up or whatever it is. But this is really, really great because you can use it for all the citrus. I use it for garlic, for ginger, for everything. And then all the oil, as you can kind of see how it's instantly wet, all that lemon oil, that's exactly what you want. And so you take it, kind of grind it into the salt. I love doing this with grapefruit as well. I think grapefruit is such a nice thing because grapefruit has that kind of bitterness in it as well. So it kind of has, you can kind of balance it off with everything else. But grapefruit is just a delicious flavor.
Gives it a great freshness.
Yeah.
Can you जल्दी कर दो?
Okay. It does smell good, right? And see how it's.
This is for dry marinating.
Yeah, like a dry cure or a salt cure, I would say. Dry marinade could be this, or a dry marinade could be also just straight spices or herbs and that kind of stuff. You can call that dry marinade, whereas this is essentially a dry marinade or a salt cure. So again, put a little bit on the bottom.
And what if it becomes too salty then?
It will only, honestly, it's kind of strange to think, but it really won't become too salty. You could leave this pretty much overnight and it probably wouldn't end up being too salty. Having a little bit of that sugar in there also helps it, but it's gonna be more about changing its texture and heavily seasoning it. And so sometimes I'll put it in there and then I'll kind of push it up against like that. See how from the bottom it's now kind of pushed up on the sides and stuff, so you kind of push it there, and then that way you know the whole thing is kind of getting cured. As it sits, the salt is going to get wetter because some of the natural moisture inside the fish is going to come out and it's going to start saturating the salt, which is totally fine. We still have some of that, so I'm going to why don't we just do this tail as well, or should we do another piece here? I'm going to cut this piece. No, yeah, take it all. As much as you need. Okay, so yeah, we'll do a thicker piece and then we're gonna do this thin piece. And then when we we'll do a little break and I'll get kind of set up. And then at the end, we're gonna taste all this. So I wanna make sure that we do enough here that we all get to taste it. So this piece here will probably cure for only about 45 minutes to an hour. This isn't like a true, straight, all the way cured. This is more of like not a mi-cuit, but it's almost like a fresh cure is what I'm gonna call it. Yeah, like it's this isn't gonna last for 2 weeks. This is gonna last for 3 days. You know what I mean, kind of thing. It's still a fresh product essentially. Whereas if you're gonna salt cure it long term to store it or preserve it, which is where salt curing came from, it wasn't because they were being fancy. They were doing it purely because they needed to cure fish to hold it for months and months. Like salt cured cod, they weren't doing it because it tastes really good. They were doing it because they have a certain season they need to catch a ton of fish and then store it for the winter or store it for everything else. And every culture has that too. I'm sure you have a product just like that you use. I do a wet marinade with almost similar to what we just did with dry, where you could take a bit of water, salt, sugar, some spices, and essentially do a wet version of what we just did. It would be very similar. It would almost be maybe speed things up a little bit, but I would do, if I chose to do a wet marinade, a wet salt marinade like that, I would probably use it to do a baked piece of fish. So I would marinate it in that salt, sugar, some spices, a bit of water. I would often probably bring that up to a simmer first and then cool it down and then add it to the salmon. and you're going to be curing it very, very similar, but essentially it's going to really firm up that salmon. So say if I was going to do that and bake it, it's going to be really seasoned. I'm not going to need to season it anymore, but it's going to kind of almost create almost like a shell on the outside and make it more, it's almost like browning a turkey. Like it's got sugar and it's got some sweetness to it. Brown sugar because it's got a little bit more kind of molassesy flavor. A little bit of soy. Soy obviously has a good amount of salt content. We have orange juice. Orange juice obviously has some acidity to it. It has obviously some flavor into it too. So we've got salt, salty, acidic, and sweet kind of all in there, which is pretty much what you want in most dishes, especially for a marinade, like that. And then we'll put a little bit of maple just because we're Canadians here. And maple's delicious. And maple and salmon, I mean, there's a reason why things go together. It's because, I mean, you look around, I mean, a lot of these things come from the same place where the salmon comes from. Maple is delicious all the time, and it really gives a nice kind of glaze to the salmon. So we can do that. And then same kind of thing, if we want to, you can take it a little bit further, add a little bit of lime zest. Or if you wanted to, you could add orange zest because we obviously already have an orange in there. Garlic, you can if you really want to. We'll just put a little one in there. You could also put some ginger in there. That. That. Tastes pretty good. If you guys want to taste this before we put it in there, as you can kind of see, it's got a look at baking one piece and maybe grilling. I don't know if we have a grill in here or not, but so I'll marinate a few more pieces after we kind of break a little bit. And honestly, you could marinate this for 2 hours. You can marinate it for 8 hours. It's not going to change it too much. I mean, it will. Obviously, the difference between 2 hours and 12 hours, the marinate's going to get further in there. But this is